I am Cassandra, 35 years old, and last month I finally achieved my dream of buying a villa in southern France with money I earned as a successful chef. My relationship with my parents has always been complicated. They consistently favored my sister over me no matter how hard I tried. When they texted me saying, "Skip Thanksgiving this year, we need space," something inside me broke and then reformed stronger. I simply replied, "Enjoy." They had no idea what I was planning next. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Have you ever been excluded from a family event? Like and subscribe if you want more stories about standing up for yourself. Growing up in Chicago, I always felt like I was living in my sister Amanda's shadow. She was 3 years older, got better grades without trying, and somehow managed to excel at everything she touched. My parents never missed her soccer games or piano recitals, but when it came to my cooking competitions or art shows, there was always some excuse. "Your father has an important meeting," or "I have a migraine coming on." I learned early that I would have to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. By 16, I had transformed my passion for cooking into a serious pursuit. While other teenagers were hanging out at the mall, I was staging at local restaurants on weekends, learning from anyone willing to teach me. My parents viewed it as a hobby, something I would grow out of when it was time to pursue a real career like Amanda, who was pre-med at Northwestern. When I announced my plans to attend culinary school instead of a traditional 4-year college, my father barely looked up from his newspaper. "Cooking is not a career, Cassandra. It is a service job." My mother nodded in agreement while showing me Amanda's latest academic achievement that had been published in the university newspaper. But I persisted. I graduated top of my class and worked my way through some of the most demanding kitchens in America. By 28, I had opened my first restaurant in New York. By 30, I had a James Beard nomination. By 32, I had launched a cooking channel that now has 3 million subscribers. None of this seemed to impress my parents as much as Amanda becoming a dermatologist, marrying a surgeon named David, having 2 perfect children, and buying a house 3 blocks away from them. Every Thanksgiving followed the same pattern. I would fly home to Chicago, bringing expensive wines and preparing elaborate meals that my mother would criticize for being too fancy, while everyone raved about Amanda's store-bought pumpkin pie. I would sit at the extended family table watching as my parents doted on Amanda's children while asking me when I was going to settle down and start a real family. My aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents noticed the disparity in treatment, occasionally shooting me sympathetic glances or making pointed comments about my success, which my parents would skillfully deflect. Despite everything, I maintained close relationships with my extended family. My grandmother Ruth was my biggest cheerleader, never missing an episode of my show and calling me weekly with feedback. My cousins followed my career with genuine interest, and my Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia frequently visited me in New York, proud of what I had accomplished. This year was supposed to be different. After years of saving and planning, I had finally purchased a beautiful villa in the south of France, complete with a vineyard and an outdoor kitchen overlooking the Mediterranean. The property had been a labor of love, requiring months of renovation to restore its rustic charm while updating the kitchen to my professional standards. I had been planning to host my very first Thanksgiving there, imagining the family gathered around my 15-foot antique oak table, enjoying a fusion of American tradition and French cuisine against the backdrop of rolling hills and cypress trees. I had dropped hints about my plans during family calls over the summer, gauging interest and receiving enthusiastic responses from everyone, except my parents, who seemed non-committal. "That is a long way to travel for a meal," my father had commented. I brushed it off, assuming they would come around once they saw how special it would be. Then came the text that changed everything. I was in the middle of testing a recipe for my channel when my phone buzzed. "Cassandra, your father and I have been talking, and we think it is best if you skip Thanksgiving this year. We want a peaceful gathering with just Amanda's family and her in-laws. We need some space. We will see you at Christmas instead." The knife I was holding clattered to the countertop. "Skip Thanksgiving needs space." From what exactly? I stared at the message, reading it over and over, looking for some hidden meaning or joke. There was none. After 35 years of showing up and trying to belong in my own family, I was being explicitly uninvited from the holiday. The text message from my mother felt like a physical blow. My hands trembled as I set down my phone on the marble countertop of my new kitchen. I had been in the middle of preparing a cranberry and orange chutney, experimenting with local French honey instead of sugar. The cranberries I had specially imported at great expense now seemed to mock me from their container. "We want a peaceful gathering," the text had said. The implication stung worse than the exclusion itself. Was I not peaceful? Did I somehow ruin their holidays with my very presence? Memories flooded back of other exclusions over the years. The time my parents forgot to tell me about Amanda's medical school graduation party until the day before, making it impossible for me to fly back from a cooking demonstration in Seattle. Or the family vacation to Italy they planned when I was in the final weeks of opening my restaurant, timing that made it impossible for me to join. I called my best friend Rebecca, immediately my voice breaking as I explained what happened. "They want a peaceful Thanksgiving with Amanda's family," I said, unable to keep the hurt from my voice, as if I am some sort of chaos monster who ruins holidays. "That is absolutely ridiculous," Rebecca replied firmly. "You are the calmest, most organized person I know. You run professional kitchens, for crying out loud. Those are not exactly environments for people who create drama. Apparently, I am good enough to cook for millions of viewers, but not good enough to sit at my parents' Thanksgiving table," I said, wiping away tears that had begun to fall despite my best efforts. "What about your plans to host at your new place?" Rebecca asked. "Did they even acknowledge that?" "No," I replied, realizing they had completely ignored my previous mentions of hosting in France. It is like they did not even hear me when I talked about it. After hanging up with Rebecca, I did something I knew I should not. I checked Amanda's social media. Sure enough, there was a recent post about Thanksgiving preparations mentioning how excited she was that her in-laws, the esteemed Dr. and Dr. Wilson, would be joining them at our parents' house this year. The post had a string of comments, including one from my mother, about how wonderful it would be to have all the family together. All the family, except me. I scrolled through more posts and discovered that Amanda's husband's brother and his wife were also coming with their new baby. So this was not about wanting a small gathering or needing space. This was about creating their ideal family configuration, and I simply did not make the cut. The realization made the pain even sharper. This was not a logistical issue or a space constraint. This was a choice, a preference. They preferred Thanksgiving without me. I spent the next hour staring out at my vineyard, watching the late autumn sun cast long shadows across the rows of grapevines. I had purchased this property with such hope, imagining holidays and gatherings where I could finally be the heart of the celebration rather than the outsider. Now those dreams seemed foolish and naive. My phone rang again. It was my grandmother, Ruth. "Cassie, did you get a strange message from your parents about Thanksgiving?" she asked without preamble. "You too," I replied, surprised. "Yes, they said they are keeping it small this year. Just them and Amanda's family. I told them I would think about it, but something seemed off." I explained the text I had received, explicitly asking me not to come. "That is ridiculous," Grandmother Ruth said, her voice sharp with disapproval. "I raised your mother better than that." As we talked, I learned that other family members had received similar messages. My Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia had been told it would be just immediate family this year. My cousins Michael and Jennifer were told the house was too small for everyone. No one was explicitly uninvited like I was, but the message was clear. The circle was being drawn smaller, and many of us were on the outside. "Everyone is quite upset," Grandmother Ruth informed me. "Your cousin Jennifer was particularly hurt. She and her new husband had already bought plane tickets to fly in from Seattle." As the conversation continued, a realization slowly dawned on me. My parents and sister had created their perfect family unit, and the rest of us were merely accessories to be included or excluded at their convenience. Year after year, I had tried to earn my way into the inner circle through achievement, through gifts, through bending over backward to accommodate their preferences, and it had never worked. Perhaps it was time to stop trying. Perhaps it was time to create something new. The next morning, I woke up early and went straight to my kitchen. Cooking had always been my therapy, my way of processing emotions and finding clarity. As I methodically chopped vegetables for a traditional French ratatouille, my grandmother's words from our conversation kept replaying in my mind. "Sometimes the family you need is not the family you were born into, but the family that chooses to stand by you," she had said before hanging up. I paused, knife hovering above a gleaming purple eggplant. The family that chooses to stand by you. An idea began to take shape in my mind, crazy at first, but growing more feasible with each passing moment. I set down my knife and reached for my phone. The first call went to my grandmother. "Grandma Ruth, what if you did not go to Chicago for Thanksgiving?" I asked without preamble. "What do you mean, dear?" she replied, curiosity in her voice. "What if you came to France instead, to my villa? What if we had our own Thanksgiving here?" There was a pause, and then my grandmother laughed a delighted sound that made me smile despite everything. "Cassandra Montgomery, are you suggesting we stage a Thanksgiving rebellion?" "That is exactly what I am suggesting," I replied, feeling more confident with each word. "I have this beautiful home, plenty of room for everyone, and I am a professional chef, for goodness sake. Why should we all be miserable in Chicago when we could be enjoying ourselves here?" "Count me in, grandmother," Ruth said without hesitation. "Your grandfather would have loved this plan. He always said you had his spirit." Emboldened by her immediate acceptance, I began making more calls. Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia were next. "We were already disappointed about Chicago," Uncle Robert said after I explained my plan. "Patricia has always wanted to see Provence. This is the perfect excuse." "We would much rather spend the holiday with you," Aunt Patricia added. "Just tell us what to bring." My cousins Michael and Jennifer were equally enthusiastic. Jennifer and her husband Adam were particularly excited since they were both foodies who had been following my career for years. "You mean we get to have Thanksgiving dinner prepared by the Cassandra Montgomery in a French villa instead of eating dry turkey at Aunt Helen's while listening to Amanda talk about skin conditions?" Michael asked. "Sign me up yesterday." By lunchtime, I had confirmations from 12 family members, all sworn to secrecy about their changed plans. Most of them told my parents they had other commitments come up, keeping explanations vague to avoid outright lies. My grandfather's brother, Great-Uncle William, who had never traveled outside the United States in his 80 years, called me back an hour after our initial conversation. "I got one of those passport application thingies from the post office," he announced proudly. "The lady there is helping me rush it through." Said it was the most romantic thing she had heard all year, an old man flying to France for a family rebellion. With my guest list confirmed, I threw myself into planning mode. My professional experience kicked in as I arranged airport pickups, coordinated sleeping arrangements, and began designing a menu that would honor traditional Thanksgiving while incorporating local French ingredients. I contacted a local vineyard owner I had befriended during my house hunting to supply wines perfectly paired with each course. I spoke with the village baker about creating special bread for the occasion. I even arranged for a local photographer to capture the event, justifying it as content for my cooking channel, but secretly planning to make sure the photos ended up on social media where my parents would see them. As the RSVPs continued to roll in, I felt a growing sense of excitement replacing my initial hurt. This would not be a Thanksgiving defined by what was missing, but by what was present. People who genuinely wanted to be together, who valued each other's company, who chose each other. A week before Thanksgiving, I received a text from my mother asking about my holiday plans. "What will you be doing for Thanksgiving since you cannot join us?" she wrote, as if checking a courtesy box. "I have made arrangements," I replied vaguely. "Do not worry about me." The truth was, for the first time in years, I was not worried about myself either. I was too busy preparing welcome baskets for my guests, planning seating arrangements for the big dinner, and testing recipes that combine the comfort of Thanksgiving tradition with the sophistication of French cuisine. I was creating something new and beautiful from what had initially felt like rejection, and the process was healing wounds I had carried for decades. The day before Thanksgiving, as I stood in the arrivals area of Marseille-Provence Airport waiting for the first group of family members to land, I felt a strange sense of peace. Whatever happened, I had taken control of my own holiday story. I was no longer waiting for a place at someone else's table. I had built my own. 3 days before Thanksgiving, as I was finalizing my shopping list for the feast, my phone buzzed with another text from my mother. "What are your plans for Thanksgiving?" she asked, as if she had not explicitly uninvited me just weeks before. "Your father and I were talking and thought we should check on you." I stared at the message, feeling a familiar twist of hope and resentment. This was their pattern. Push me away, then feign concern just enough to maintain the appearance of caring parents. Not this time. "I have plans," I typed back. "Enjoy your peaceful holiday." Within minutes, my phone rang. It was my father, a rare occurrence that immediately set me on edge. "Cassandra," he said, his voice carrying that perpetually disappointed tone I knew so well. "Your mother is concerned about you." "Is she?" I replied, continuing to chop mushrooms for the stuffing I was testing. "That is interesting timing." "Now do not be difficult," he said with a sigh. "We are just trying to make sure you are not alone for the holiday." The mushrooms received the brunt of my sudden anger, the knife coming down with more force than necessary. "I have been alone plenty of times when it suited you," I said, struggling to keep my voice even. "Remember my 30th birthday when you and Mom had to attend Amanda's daughter's preschool Thanksgiving pageant instead?" "That was different," he said dismissively. "Perhaps you should use this time to reflect on why you are always so difficult about family gatherings. Amanda never creates these problems." I set the knife down before I could damage my expensive cutting board. "Thank you for the suggestion, Dad. I will be sure to do some deep reflection on why I am such a disappointment while I enjoy my holiday." I ended the call before he could respond, my hands shaking with suppressed emotion. The conversation was so familiar it felt scripted. I was always the difficult one, the one who needed to change, to accommodate, to understand. Never them. The next day, Amanda called. This was even more unusual as we typically communicated through obligatory group texts and occasional comments on social media. "Mom is upset," she said without greeting. "She thinks you are angry about Thanksgiving." "What gave her that impression?" I asked, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice as I checked on the cranberry sauce simmering on my stove. "Cassie, you know how they are," Amanda said with the long-suffering tone of the favored child who cannot understand why everyone does not just go along to get along. "They are getting older. David says we need to be patient with them." "Of course David says that," I replied. "Their world revolves around him, you, and the kids. Must be nice." "That is not fair," Amanda protested. "They are trying to have a peaceful holiday. The kids have been challenging lately, and David's parents can be a lot to handle. They just needed to simplify things this year." By uninviting their other daughter, I pointed out. "Not the grandchildren, not the in-laws, just me." "You are taking this too personally," Amanda said. "It is just one Thanksgiving." "It is never just one anything with them, Amanda. It is a pattern, but you would not understand that." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means you have never had to wonder if you matter to them," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. "You have never been the afterthought." The line went quiet for a moment. "That is not true," Amanda finally said, her voice smaller. "They just show love differently to different people." "Keep telling yourself that," I replied. "Enjoy your peaceful Thanksgiving." After hanging up, I threw myself into preparations with renewed determination. My villa would be filled with family in less than 48 hours, and everything needed to be perfect. Not just to prove something to my parents, but to create the holiday I had always wanted, warm, inclusive, and centered around food made with love. The first group arrived that evening. Uncle Robert, Aunt Patricia, and their son Michael tumbled out of the airport shuttle, exclaiming over the beauty of the countryside even in the gathering dusk. Grandmother Ruth arrived an hour later, her elegant white hair perfectly coiffed despite the transatlantic flight. "This place is magnificent, Cassie," she said as I gave her a tour of the villa. "You have created something truly special here." The next morning brought more arrivals. Cousins from both sides of the family, great aunts and uncles, even my father's sister Eileen, who had apparently told my parents she was spending Thanksgiving with a friend in Arizona. By nightfall, all 15 guests had arrived, and the villa hummed with conversation and laughter as everyone explored the property and settled into their rooms. I had converted the library, sunroom, and even my office into comfortable sleeping spaces. Some of the younger cousins were bunking together in the larger guest rooms, treating it like a slumber party. Nobody complained about the arrangements. Instead, they marveled at the stone walls, the vineyard views, and the incredible smells coming from the kitchen where I had been prepping for days. After dinner that night, a simple but elegant affair of local cheeses, freshly baked bread, and hearty beef bourguignon, we gathered in the great room with glasses of wine. Uncle Robert proposed a toast. "To Cassandra," he said, raising his glass, "for bringing us together in this magnificent place and for reminding us what family should really be about." Everyone raised their glasses, and I felt a lump form in my throat at the genuine affection in their faces. This was what I had been seeking all along without realizing it. Not my parents' approval, but simply belonging, being valued for exactly who I was. As the evening wound down, my cousin Jennifer pulled me aside. "I should warn you," she said quietly. "I talked to Grandma Helen yesterday, and she mentioned to your mom that she was flying to Europe for Thanksgiving. She did not say where exactly, but so they might suspect something I finished for her." Jennifer nodded. "Just thought you should know they might be putting pieces together." "Let them wonder," I replied, surprising myself with how little I cared. Tomorrow is about us, not them. Later that night, as I lay in bed listening to the distant sounds of my family preparing for sleep throughout the villa, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. "Interesting that so many family members suddenly had other plans for Thanksgiving. Your grandmother is not answering her phone. Do you know anything about this?" I read the message twice, noticing the accusatory tone, the assumption that I must be behind whatever was happening. For once, they were right, but I felt no obligation to confirm their suspicions. "Everyone makes their own holiday choices," I wrote back. "Like you did when you uninvited me. Good night." I turned off my phone completely after that, unwilling to let anything disrupt the peace I had found. Tomorrow would be a Thanksgiving unlike any other in our family's history, and I intended to savor every moment of it. Thanksgiving morning at the villa dawned clear and crisp, with the late November sun casting a golden glow across the vineyard. I had been up since 5, the professional chef in me automatically adhering to the punishing schedule of holiday cooking, despite the fact that I had plenty of help this year. The kitchen was soon bustling with activity. Grandmother Ruth supervised the peeling of 10 pounds of potatoes, her hands still nimble despite her 80 years. Uncle Robert, who had once trained as a pastry chef before going into accounting, handled the desserts, creating both traditional pumpkin pies and a spectacular French tarte tatin. My cousins moved between stations, chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, and occasionally breaking into impromptu dance parties when someone put on music. By noon, the smells wafting through the villa were intoxicating. The 20-pound turkey, which I had special ordered from a local farm, was roasting to bronze perfection. I had prepared it with a blend of herbs from my garden butter infused with truffles from a nearby market, and a technique I had perfected over years of professional cooking. Alongside the turkey, we prepared all the traditional fixings: mashed potatoes with roasted garlic, cornbread stuffing with local mushrooms, and sausage green bean casserole, elevated with fresh beans, and homemade cream of mushroom soup. Cranberry sauce infused with orange and cognac buttery rolls still warm from the oven, and gravy made from turkey drippings so rich it could stand as a dish on its own. But being in France, I could not resist adding some local flair. We had a charcuterie board featuring regional specialties to start a white bean cassoulet as an additional side dish, and local cheeses to be served before dessert. The wines, carefully selected from neighboring vineyards, would complement each course perfectly. At 3 in the afternoon, everyone gathered around the massive oak table in the dining room. I had decorated it with gourds, fall leaves, and candles, creating a setting worthy of a magazine spread. At each place, setting was a small gift: a personalized leather journal, with each guest's name embossed on the cover. Great Uncle William, as the eldest, was asked to say grace. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he reached out to those seated beside him, completing the circle around the table. "Lord," he began, his voice wavering with emotion, "we thank you for this food, for this beautiful place, and most especially for bringing us together today. We thank you for Cassandra, whose heart and home have welcomed us all. May we always remember that family is not about obligation, but about love freely given and received. Amen." "Amen," echoed around the table, and I blinked back, tears touched by his words. The meal that followed was everything I had hoped for. Plates were filled and refilled, compliments flowed as freely as the wine, and conversation never lulled. Stories were shared about Thanksgivings past, about family members no longer with us, about hopes for the future. "Remember when Grandpa Montgomery set the garage on fire trying to deep fry a turkey?" Michael asked, setting off a round of laughter and competing versions of the story. "Or the year Aunt Eileen brought that horrible boyfriend who turned out to be vegetarian and announced it as the turkey was being carved," Jennifer added, causing Aunt Eileen to groan dramatically. "Darling, you have outdone yourself," Grandmother Ruth said as she took another bite of turkey. This is the best Thanksgiving meal I have ever had, and I have had 92 of them. As the main course gave way to dessert, Uncle Robert stood up with his wine glass. I would like to propose another toast, he said, to found family, to choosing to be together even when it is not easy or convenient, and to Cassandra, who reminded us all that sometimes you have to make your own place at the table. To Cassandra, everyone chorused, raising their glasses. The warmth in the room was palpable, a physical manifestation of the connection we all shared. For the first time in my life, I did not feel like I was trying to earn my place. I simply belonged. After dinner, as we moved to the great room for coffee and digestives, the photo-taking began in earnest. Selfies, group shots, artistic compositions featuring the food and decor. My cousin Jennifer, a social media consultant, directed an impromptu photo shoot on the terrace with the sunset providing a spectacular backdrop. "These are too good not to share," she said, scrolling through her camera roll. "Mind if I post a few?" I hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Go ahead, tag everyone." Within minutes, photos of our French Thanksgiving began appearing across various social media platforms. Pictures of the table before we sat down showing off my careful decorations. Action shots of the carving of the turkey. Group photos with everyone raising glasses in toast. Candid moments of laughter and conversation. And through it all, the unmistakable setting of a French villa, with its stone walls, vineyard views, and distinctly European architectural details. We were midway through a raucous game of charades when my grandmother's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her eyebrows shot up. "It is your mother," she said to me, stepping out of the room to answer. When she returned a few minutes later, her expression was a mixture of amusement and exasperation. She saw the photos grandmother Ruth announced. She wanted to know why I was in France when I told her I could not come to Chicago because of my arthritis. "What did you tell her?" I asked, my heart suddenly racing. "The truth," my grandmother replied simply. "That I would walk across burning coals to be at my granddaughter's first Thanksgiving in her new home. And that my arthritis seems much better in the French countryside." The room erupted in laughter, but it was cut short by the buzzing of my own phone. I pulled it out to see a text from Amanda. "Everyone is posting pictures from France. Mom and Dad are losing their minds. What did you do?" Before I could even begin to formulate a response, another text came through, this one from my father. "Call us. Now." I looked up from my phone to see 15 pairs of eyes watching me expectantly. This was the moment of confrontation I had both dreaded and anticipated. "It appears," I said, trying to keep my voice light, "that the cat is out of the bag." I excused myself to take the call in my study, closing the heavy wooden door behind me. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed my parents' number, but I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was standing in my own home, surrounded by people who had chosen to be with me. Whatever happened next, I would be okay. My mother answered on the first ring. "Cassandra Elizabeth Montgomery, what have you done?" she demanded, not bothering with a greeting. "Hello to you too, Mom," I replied, struggling to keep my voice even. "I am having Thanksgiving dinner with family. I thought that was the traditional thing to do." "You know exactly what I mean," she snapped. "Half the family is mysteriously missing from Chicago, and now there are pictures all over Facebook of everyone at some villa in France. Your villa. The one you never bothered to tell us about." "I told you about my villa multiple times," I corrected her. "You never seemed interested. And as for the family being here, they all made their own decisions about where to spend the holiday." "You deliberately undermined our Thanksgiving." My father's voice cut in, indicating he was on speakerphone. "You turned the family against us out of spite." The accusation stung, but it also ignited something inside me, a slow, burning anger that had been building for years. "I did not turn anyone against you," I said carefully. "I simply offered an alternative to people who, like me, were excluded from your perfect family tableau." "We did not exclude anyone," my mother protested. "We just needed a smaller gathering this year." "Yet somehow it includes Amanda's entire extended family," I pointed out. "Let us be honest for once. You did not want me there. You have never wanted me at the table unless I could serve some purpose, like cooking the meal or providing an audience for Amanda's latest achievements." "That is not true," my father interjected, but his voice lacked conviction. "It is true," I insisted, feeling decades of hurt crystallizing into clear, irrefutable facts. "Do you know what Thanksgiving was like for me growing up? It was watching you praise Amanda for a store-bought pie while criticizing the handmade rolls I spent hours on. It was listening to you introduce me to relatives as our other daughter, as if I were an afterthought. It was trying desperately to earn a place at my own family table year after year, only to be reminded that nothing I did would ever be enough. You are being dramatic, my mother said dismissively. We have always treated you and your sister equally. I actually laughed at that, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. Mom, you literally told me not to come to Thanksgiving this year. How is that equal treatment? We explained that. We needed space. Space from me specifically. Not from Amanda, not from her husband, not from her in-laws or her kids, just me. The line went quiet for a moment, and I could almost see them exchanging glances across their kitchen, searching for the right platitude to smooth this over without addressing the real issue. Well, you certainly got your revenge, my father finally said. Grandmother Ruth can barely walk yet. Somehow you convinced her to fly to France just to spite us. Grandmother Ruth is currently beating everyone at charades and has spent the day helping in the kitchen, I informed him. She came because she wanted to, not because I manipulated her. That might be hard for you to understand, but some people actually enjoy my company. Just then, there was a knock at my study door, and Grandmother Ruth herself poked her head in. Everything all right, dear? She asked, concern evident in her eyes. I nodded and gestured for her to come in. I am talking to Mom and Dad. They have seen the pictures. Put them on speaker, she said firmly, settling into the leather armchair across from my desk. I complied, pressing the speaker button. Mom, Dad, Grandmother Ruth is here with me now. Mother, how could you? My mother immediately began. You told us your arthritis was too bad to travel, but apparently it is fine for a trip to France. Helen, my grandmother, said her voice carrying the weight of authority that only comes with age. I made a choice about where I wanted to spend my holiday. Perhaps if you had not excluded your own daughter, I would have made a different choice. We did not exclude her, my father protested weakly. We just wanted a peaceful holiday. Robert, my grandmother said, addressing my father directly. I raised your wife better than this, and I thought her influence would have raised you better too. Family is not something you can put on a shelf when it is inconvenient. Cassandra has spent her entire life trying to earn your approval, and all she has received in return is conditional love at best. That is not fair, my mother interjected. What is not fair, Grandmother Ruth continued undeterred, is watching my granddaughter achieve remarkable things and receive nothing but criticism from the people who should be her biggest supporters. What is not fair is seeing one child elevated and another diminished in ways both obvious and subtle for 35 years. My eyes filled with tears at her fierce defense at having someone finally name the dynamic that had shaped my entire life. Before my parents could respond, my phone buzzed with another incoming call. It was Amanda. Amanda is calling, I told everyone in both rooms. I should take this. Put her on the conference, Grandmother Ruth suggested. It is time we all talked honestly. I added Amanda to the call, bracing myself for more accusations. Cassie, Amanda's voice came through sounding uncharacteristically uncertain. What is going on? Mom and Dad are furious, and David's parents are asking uncomfortable questions about why half the family is in France instead of here. Your sister decided to sabotage our Thanksgiving, my father said, before I could respond. I did not sabotage anything, I countered. I created an alternative for people who were not welcome at your table, including me. Of course you were welcome, Amanda said automatically. No, I was not. I replied, my voice steady now. Mom literally texted me not to come, that they wanted a peaceful Thanksgiving with just your family. There was a pause. Mom, is that true? Amanda asked, surprise evident in her tone. We just needed to simplify things this year, my mother hedged. The house gets so crowded, and with David's parents coming. So you uninvited your own daughter, Amanda's voice had taken on an edge I had never heard before. How could you do that? It is not like she does not have other options, my father said defensively. Obviously she has this villa in France no one knew about. I told you about buying this property 6 months ago, I said wearily. I sent emails with pictures. I talked about it on our monthly family calls. You just were not listening as usual. I remember, Amanda said quietly. You were so excited about the vineyard and the kitchen renovation. You talked about hosting Thanksgiving here. See? My mother jumped in. She was planning this all along. No, I said firmly. I mentioned wanting to host Thanksgiving here. You ignored me, then explicitly uninvited me from your Thanksgiving. I adapted. By stealing the entire extended family, my father accused. By offering an alternative to people who were also being pushed to the periphery of your ever-shrinking circle, I corrected. No one was stolen. Everyone made their own choice. Including me, Grandmother Ruth added, and I stand by my decision. There was a long silence on the line. I could almost feel the shifting of tectonic plates in our family dynamic fault lines that had been there all along, finally giving way to create a new landscape. I think Amanda said slowly that we need to acknowledge some hard truths here. Mom, Dad, Cassie is right. You have always treated us differently. I benefited from it, so I never said anything, but that does not make it okay. I felt my breath catch in my throat. Never in 35 years had Amanda acknowledged the disparity in our treatment. That is ridiculous, my mother protested, but her voice sounded less certain. It is not ridiculous, it is reality, Amanda insisted. You drop everything for my kids' activities, but have never once visited Cassie's restaurant. You have my family portrait on the mantle, but Cassie's James Beard Award announcement is stuck on the refrigerator under a magnet. You plan family events around my schedule, but expect Cassie to just show up whenever, even though she runs multiple businesses? We are proud of both our daughters, my father said stiffly. Being proud is not the same as showing it, Amanda replied. And uninviting one daughter from Thanksgiving while welcoming everyone connected to the other is about as clear a message as you could send about who matters in this family. The silence that followed was weighted with decades of unspoken truths finally laid bare. I did not do this to hurt you, I said finally, my voice softer now. I did it because for once I wanted to be at the center of a family gathering rather than on the edge looking in. I wanted to create the holiday I never got to have growing up, and judging by the 15 people currently playing charades in my living room, I am not the only one who needed that. 15 people, my mother repeated, sounding stunned. Yes, Grandmother Ruth confirmed. Cousin Michael and his wife Jennifer and her husband Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia Eileen and her new gentleman friend Great Uncle William, who got his first passport for this trip, and several others. We are having a wonderful time, Helen. The food is spectacular, the company is delightful, and no one feels like an unwelcome guest. Another silence fell, this one different from the others. I could almost hear the gears turning in my parents' minds as they processed the reality that the majority of the family had chosen to be with me in France rather than with them in Chicago. I think my father said slowly that your mother and I need to have a private conversation. That sounds like a good idea, Grandmother Ruth agreed, and perhaps once you have had that conversation you might consider calling back with something that resembles an apology. With that, she reached over and ended the call before anyone could respond. I sat back in my chair, emotionally drained but strangely lightened, as if a weight I had carried for so long I had forgotten it was there had finally been lifted. You did well, Grandmother Ruth said, reaching across the desk to squeeze my hand. It is never easy to speak your truth to people who have spent a lifetime not hearing you. Thank you for being here, I replied, my voice thick with emotion. For everything. I would not be anywhere else, she said simply. Now shall we rejoin the party? I believe there is tart tatin waiting to be served. As we walked back to the great room, I could hear the sounds of laughter and conversation, the unmistakable noise of people enjoying each other's company. My phone buzzed in my pocket with another text, this one from Amanda. I am sorry for everything, for not seeing it sooner, for not saying anything. Can we talk tomorrow, just us? I typed back a simple yes before putting my phone away and stepping back into the warmth of my chosen family, ready to finish the Thanksgiving celebration I had created from what had initially felt like rejection. The day after Thanksgiving dawned with a gentle rain tapping against the windows of the villa, creating a cozy atmosphere that encouraged lingering over coffee and leftover pumpkin pie for breakfast. My guests were in no hurry to disperse, with most planning to stay through the weekend to explore the surrounding countryside and villages. I was in the kitchen preparing a late breakfast for everyone when my phone rang. I checked the screen, half expecting it to be my parents, but instead saw Amanda's name. Hey, I answered, stepping out onto the covered terrace for privacy. Hey, she replied, her voice sounding tired. That was quite a night. Yes, it was. I agreed, watching raindrops create ripples in the swimming pool. Mom and Dad barely spoke after the call. Amanda continued. They went to bed early, and this morning Dad announced they were going for a drive to clear their heads. They have been gone for hours. How are you doing with everything? I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. There was a long pause before she answered. Honestly, I feel terrible, like I have been complicit in something really wrong for most of my life. It was not the response I had expected, and it took me a moment to formulate a reply. You were a child too, Amanda. It was not your responsibility to fix our parents' behavior. Maybe not when we were kids, she conceded, but I am 38 now. I have known for years that they treat us differently. I just never said anything because it benefited me, I guess. And that makes me feel pretty awful about myself. Her honesty surprised me. In all our years of dancing around the family dynamic, neither of us had ever addressed it this directly. For what it is worth, I said carefully, I never blamed you. I was jealous sometimes, sure, but I always understood that you were just accepting what was offered to you, not deliberately taking anything from me. Still, she insisted I should have said something. Done something. Not just accepted the status quo because it was comfortable for me. Well, you said something last night, I pointed out. That was a start. Too little, too late, she said with a sigh. But I want you to know I meant it. And I want to do better, to be a better sister. The rain had begun to fall harder, creating a soothing white noise that made this difficult conversation feel somehow safer, more contained. I would like that, I said softly. So tell me about this villa, Amanda said, her tone deliberately lighter. From the pictures, it looks incredible. I spent the next 20 minutes describing the property, the renovation process, and my plans for the future. Amanda listened attentively, asking questions that indicated genuine interest, something I could not remember her doing before. You should bring the kids next summer, I found myself offering. There is a great pool and the village has an amazing ice cream shop. They would love that, she said, sounding surprised but pleased by the invitation. Maybe we could all come. Try to start fresh. It was a tentative olive branch, and despite everything, I found myself wanting to accept it. One step at a time, I replied gently. But I am open to the possibility. After we hung up, I rejoined my guests in the dining room where Great-Uncle William was regaling everyone with stories of his first international flight. The young lady next to me could not believe I was traveling abroad for the first time at 80, he chuckled. She took my picture for her Instagram, called me an inspiration. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text notification. It was from my mother, brief but unexpected. Your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking. Can we call you later today? I showed the message to Grandmother Ruth, who raised an eyebrow but nodded encouragingly. Be open to hearing them, she advised, but do not accept anything less than a genuine acknowledgement of the past. The call came that evening after dinner had been cleared and most of my guests had settled into various corners of the villa with books, board games, or glasses of wine. Cassandra, my mother began when I answered her voice, lacking its usual certainty. Your father and I have spent the day talking, really talking for the first time in a long time. That sounds positive, I said cautiously. We owe you an apology, my father said, cutting to the chase in a way that was both characteristic and completely unexpected given the content. For a lot of things, but most immediately for excluding you from Thanksgiving. I sat down on the edge of my bed, taken aback by the direct acknowledgement. Thank you for saying that, I managed. We have not been fair to you, my mother continued, for a very long time. And when we saw those pictures yesterday of all those people choosing to be with you in France, it forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about how we have treated you versus how we have treated Amanda. It was never conscious, my father added. We never sat down and decided to favor one child over another. But looking back, the pattern is undeniable, and we are deeply sorry for the pain that has caused you. I felt tears begin to form, but blinked them back, unwilling to be overwhelmed by emotion just yet. I appreciate you saying that, I said carefully. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it. We would like to do better, my mother said. If you are willing to give us the chance. What does that look like to you, I asked, unwilling to agree to vague promises that might never materialize into actual change. For starters, we thought maybe we could all try family therapy, my father suggested, surprising me again. The four of us. To work through some of these patterns with professional help. We also want to come see your villa, my mother added, and your restaurant in New York. We have never properly celebrated your achievements, and that was wrong of us. And we thought perhaps next Thanksgiving could be different, my father said. Maybe we could all be together wherever you want to host it. The offers were concrete, specific, and addressed exactly the kinds of changes I had always hoped for but never expected to receive. It was almost disorienting to hear them now. I would be open to trying therapy, I said after a moment, and you would be welcome to visit the villa someday. As for next Thanksgiving, let us see how the year goes, one step at a time. That is more than fair, my mother agreed quickly. We know trust has to be rebuilt. We are just grateful for the chance to try. After ending the call, I sat for a long time looking out at the night sky through my bedroom window. The stars were impossibly bright here, away from city lights, each one distinct and clear against the black canvas of night. Like truth after years of obfuscation, I thought. I made my way back downstairs to where my family was gathered in the great room. Grandmother Ruth looked up questioningly as I entered. They apologized, I said simply. Actually apologized without qualifiers or excuses. They want to try family therapy. Well, I will be, Uncle Robert exclaimed. Miracles do happen. Not miracles, Grandmother Ruth corrected gently. Just people finally facing consequences and making better choices. The weekend passed in a blur of lazy meals, wine tasting at neighboring vineyards, and long conversations by the fire. By the time everyone departed on Sunday with hugs and promises to return, I felt a profound shift in how I saw myself within the larger constellation of my family. No longer the outsider striving for acceptance, but a central point around which others had willingly gathered. In the quiet of the empty villa that evening, I found myself in the kitchen, the place where I had always felt most at home. As I prepared a simple meal for myself, I reflected on the extraordinary sequence of events that had led to this moment. What had begun as exclusion had transformed into one of the most meaningful experiences of my life. By creating my own space when no room was made for me, I had not only found healing for myself, but had catalyzed a potential healing for my entire family. The months that followed brought cautious but real changes. My parents visited the villa in the spring, awkward at first, but gradually relaxing into genuine appreciation of the life I had built. Family therapy sessions were challenging but productive, bringing to light patterns that had gone unaddressed for decades. Amanda and I began having regular sister weekends, slowly building the relationship we had never had as children. And when the following November approached, I found myself extending an invitation to everyone, parents included, to return to the villa for another Thanksgiving. Not out of obligation or a desperate need for approval, but from a place of strength and genuine desire for connection. As I stirred a pot of soup that evening, watching the sun set over my vineyard, I thought about the difficult journey that had brought me here. The years of feeling less than, of striving for validation that never came, had been painful beyond measure, but they had also forged in me a determination and self-reliance that had ultimately created this beautiful life. Sometimes I realize the greatest gift we can give ourselves is to stop waiting for a place at someone else's table and build our own. To create spaces where we and others can be fully seen and valued. To transform exclusion into inclusion, pain into purpose, rejection into community. That Thanksgiving had taught me that family in its truest sense is not defined by obligation or blood alone, but by choice. By people who show up for each other, who make room at the table, who choose connection over convenience. Sometimes those people are the ones we were born to. Sometimes they are the ones we find along the way. And sometimes they are both. Have you ever had to create your own space when you were not welcome elsewhere? How did that experience change you? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the most powerful response to rejection is creating something beautiful of your own. Thank you for joining me for this deeply personal story, and remember that your worth is never determined by those who fail to see it.